I have a little bit of a brake line leak. Ah, there it is. Leaking up on the frame a little bit there. It's the line going from the ABS module to the left front wheel. I know this because when I hit the brakes on the highway, the car darted to the right. That was fun. Before I get started replacing all these brake lines, I'm going to show you the real basic stuff of what I got going on. I got the truck jacked up off of all 4 tires. You can put a jack on the center of this cross beam right here. And then I was able to get a jack stand on the frame here. And then the back, put a jack way back on the pumpkin of the differential, then a jack stand underneath each end. So now all 4 tires are off the ground. It's easiest to do this job with all 4 tires removed at the same time, so you can crawl around it and get to everything. Next, I got the tools that I like to use for this. You can buy these bulk 25-foot rolls, or you can buy kits that are stainless steel. They do make them for this truck. I prefer to make them myself. I typically reuse the flare nuts. They're usually not in bad shape. If they are, I'll just replace them. They're not that expensive. But that's what the hacksaw is for. It's a lot faster than this tubing cutter. You can just hack the thing right off and slide the flare nut off of it. The reason you do that is if you cut the line with this, once you smash it, the flare nut doesn't fit over the line anymore. I don't have a vise here today, so I'm going to try to use these vise grips to hold the brake line while I hacksaw the end of it. You will need a flare nut wrench. A lot of these fittings are 9/16. I also recommend getting a stubby 9/16. This works wonders for getting on top of that ABS module that's on the frame. A 14, you might be able to get away with it. 9/16 is just a hair smaller and tends to not strip out the flare nuts. Hammer and a punch for hitting out the brake line from the flare nut if they're stuck. This is for removing the tires and the hubcaps. And then this guy right here is for removing these clips for the wheel well. We have to remove this whole plastic shield to get to the master cylinder and these lines right here. And then of course some brake clean towels and a flashlight. Oh goody. Alright, when they're stuck, put a lug nut on it so it can't fly off. And then you'll hit it on the rubber on the back side. There you go. First try. Going to use this tire as a seat because you're going to be at this left front corner for a lot of this process. So next we got to remove this left front splash shield. In my case, it might self-remove. Yum. Okay, looks like in my case I got one more stray that's used to be part of the mud flap. It's no longer here. Oh, well, that's broke now. So now we'll fold it down. Got a couple of wiring harnesses to remove from it. There we go, should be 2 more back there. I guess you probably could have done this one at the hood too, but oh well. There we go. Okay. There, and now we can see the line that's leaking pretty clearly. Now, no matter how you do this, it's just going to make a mess. You got to catch the brake fluid best you can. I'm going to unplug the brake fluid level sensor just to get it out of the way. It'll be easier later when I'm putting the brake lines back in it. There's a little plastic clip right here. Ideally, you'll want to keep this clip around because you'll reuse it when you put the new lines on. Alright, got a line wrench. Once they're broke loose with this line wrench, then you can use an open end on them without stripping them out. So notice how these brake lines have a little loop before they go into the master cylinder. This loop gives the line a little bit of flex. So when the body flex is different than the frame, it doesn't break the brake lines over time. So we'll need to remake these when we put them back together. Alright, I'm going to start cutting and hacking. I'm going to cut down here because it's rustier and it'll be easier to cut. Just saw the end of this thing off. So that's what I mean by just sawing them off. It's faster than a tube nut. And now I can just take this nut, pop it right off. And now I'm going to put it back in the master cylinder so I can't lose it between the time I actually need it and now. So when you're tearing out these brake lines and you get to this ABS module, don't worry about keeping track of which ones these are, because I'm going to give you a diagram. So to orient you, the front of the truck is that way. So this right here is the driver's side running board. So these will have two different variations. Sometimes they have 4 lines on top. Usually they have 3. The ones that have 3 on top have rear wheel ABS instead of 4-wheel ABS. And then these 2 on the bottom are always going to be on the bottom. These are your master cylinder feed lines. So this one right here is the front of the master cylinder, because this is feeding the back wheel, which is this line over here back in the corner. This one here, closest to the center of the truck, is the rear of the master cylinder because it's feeding the front. And now these 2 lines are going to be opposite of each other. So this one is on the driver's side of the truck, but it runs the right front wheel. And then this one is on the passenger side of the truck, or closer to it, and it drives the left front wheel. So go ahead and rip this thing up, and I'll get a picture diagram of it up here for you too, in case that was confusing. Finally got all the brake lines ripped out of this thing. You can see this one that looks a little cleaner than the other ones. This one was the one going towards the back, and it had been replaced before, which is why it's cleaner. And it was almost ready to pop again. A couple different spots actually. That just tells you how bad all this is. All of those rusty lines are the biggest reason that I choose this nickel copper brake line tubing. The kits you get are usually stainless steel, which also solve the rust problem. You can see I have 2 25-foot packages of 1/4 inch, and then I have 1 leftover roll of 3/16. So this is going to be from the brake hose in the rear to the left rear and the right rear tire, and then a 1/4 is going to do everything else. There are 2 kinds of flares you'll run into with brake systems. One is a double flare or an ISO flare. The other one is a bubble flare. In this case, for these trucks, all the fittings are double flare, so you only need the double flare tool. Quick little tech tip before I get started. Hard lines are measured in outside diameter, which means I have a 1/4 inch wrench, and I can tell that these are 1/4 inch lines because this wrench fits over the line pretty snugly and I can't twist it back and forth. Whereas I put it on this 3/16 line, and you can see it has some play in it. I don't have a 3/16 wrench, which would be the best way to verify this, but you kind of get the idea. So I'm going to go ahead and remove both flare nuts from their houses. So the way I like to do it is I'll just simply unbend this, make it fairly straight. You'll find this nickel copper tubing is very easy to bend, easy on the wrists, easy on the hands. It's also easier on your flare tool. Gonna loosen up my jaws here. I'm gonna put this through the appropriate sized hole, which in this case for the 3/16 would be the first one. Grab the 3/16 adapter here. And the first step on the adapter is how far the line needs to be sticking out past the jaws. So that's our measuring tool. So we'll put that there, keeping it clamped with my fingers, and then we'll tighten this down. I'm going to be mean to my tools and tighten these down with this screwdriver. One, because the little teeth inside the jaw are all messed up and the line tends to push through. And second, these not being tight enough is the reason it pushes through in the first place to even ruin the threads. So just giving them a pretty good snug, but not going crazy on it. Next, I'm going to take this yoke here, back it all the way out, and take this insert. You'll see it has a little nub on it. You'll put that inside the line, slip the yoke over the bar, put the yoke on the back side of the cone, get it all snugged up, then grab this bar here and we're going to tighten it all the way down until it stops. Then I'm going to back this out just enough to get this insert piece out. Make sure the nub on the inside there didn't break off inside the line. That happens sometimes. And then you're going to run this back down again, hence why it's called a double flare. They're right in the center, and then you're going to run this down until it stops again. Back this out. Loosen up my jaws. And when you're done, you'll see that you have made a perfectly good double flare fitting. I'm sure there were some of you watching that figured out that I forgot to put this flare nut on, so now I get to feed it all the way around this whole line to get it back where it needs to go. If I would have had a flare on both sides of this line, I would have had to cut one of them off to get this fitting on. It's like that toy at the doctor's office you push all the little wood beads around on. There we go. So now I'm going to route this and be mindful of where the stock line was. So I've got to try to mimic that. So it doesn't have to be precise right at first. Just kind of get some overall big bends in here. Get this lined up and just start it by hand. Sometimes it helps to wiggle the line around different positions as you're trying to turn it. And there we go. Got it 2 or 3 threads and turn it a little bit more here. And I'm not going to snug this down all the way. I'm just going to go until it hits. And the reason for that is because we're going to come here and try to bleed this out from this line because my bleeder screws look like absolute garbage. And most of the time you can get away with this because yes, this part above is higher than this. A lot of times the skin of the brake fluid, kind of similar to how water kind of has that skin to it, will usually keep it in place. So we're going to try this first, go for a test drive, and if it doesn't work, then we'll try it the hard way. But most of the time I've gotten pretty lucky by just bleeding it here. Now I have my bracket here. You can see that it was going this way before. Just like that. So my brake line was coming down and then up through it to go that way. So we're going to try to mimic that. We want it to stay behind the differential for protection from rocks and other things that may fly into it. Alright, so now I gotta fight the parking brake cable and this thing here. Fought that bolt a little bit, but finally did get it to start. There we go, just getting it a little snug. And you'll notice that this brake line is very, very loose inside of that bracket, as the original line had that spring that wrapped around it to protect it from rocks and things flying at it. So we're going to have to take pliers to smash this bracket down onto this line to keep it from moving. because this line dancing around like this is going to eat through the line and cause a leak later. But I'm not going to do that until we get that line figured out, just in case I mess up the flare and have to cut it off and try again. So I think I have a little bit too much line in the back here, so I'm going to push this through a little bit. Going to make a sharper corner out of it here. There we go. And then it has more protection from the differential this way. Then I'm going to bend the line at kind of a right angle, but be careful not to kink it. If you kink it, you got to make the whole line over. And then I'll just kind of eyeball measure it to where it needs to go, because I got everything in place. So I'm going to go about halfway, eyeball it here, and then a little bit more. This gives me a little bit of wiggle room in case the flare gets messed up and I have to cut it off and start over again. So I have a tubing cutter this time instead of the hacksaw. This gives you a cleaner cut. Snug it on there, don't smash it, spin it around, tighten it, spin it around a couple times, tighten it, spin it around a couple times, tighten it, you get the idea. Just like that, now we have a nice clean cut. This reamer tool makes sure we don't have any loose debris that will cause problems with our flare. Clean that out. And then the flaring process is the same as before, except this time I'm not going to forget my flare nut. And here we go. The flare is a little lopsided. If it was any worse than that, we might want to redo it, but it will work for our cases. So now I'm going to kind of use a little corner and kind of bend it upwards a little bit to take up some of that slack. Once again, I'm going to kind of give it a zigzag to take up the slack that I created. And then once again, same as the other one, kind of wiggle the line back and forth to get the nut centered in there, and then start it by hand. It's very important you start it by hand to not strip out threads. We can see it started. So this fitting, I'm going to go ahead and tighten down, because we should only have to bleed it at that fitting over there. So the ones in the middle, you should be fine to go ahead and tighten down. And then repeat this process for the other side. So now that everything's all ran, make sure it's not touching anything. I'm going to take some channel locks here and smash this thing down. Yes, there are better ways to do this, but this is what's going to happen today. So now our brake line is locked in there, it's not going to move, and if it can't move, that means it's not going to rub on stuff and tear through and cause another leak, which is of course a safety problem. This side has 3 of them. Can't really get to this one though, but I may just leave it. But we got one here. And then one up here. Okay. I'm gonna have to loosen this to get access to that. There we go. I did go a little bit too much on that one. The brake line started to crush. Shouldn't cause any issues though, as it just started to, but definitely not ideal. These 2 lines here are the end of everything 3/16 on these trucks and also Suburbans, Tahoes, things like that. Everything else is a 1/4 inch starting from this brake line forward. I am now in the middle of the truck. That way is forward, this way is backwards. Here's my ABS module. Basically it's about underneath the driver's seat, and I usually like to do the rear line, the right front, left front, front of the master cylinder, rear of the master cylinder, in orientation with the car, of course. So this right here for the rear. Start from the furthest one back, the one that's hardest to get to. So the factory line does an immediate U-turn and goes straight back on top of the frame. Now, unless you want to mount the brake line properly, you're gonna have to drop the fuel tank, because you can't get your hands in there to put it in the factory clips. So there's a section of this line that's just gonna kind of be hanging out. Unfortunately, it's how it is. I've never actually seen it cause any problems. So when we go to shove our line through, I like to take a vacuum cap, just like this one, and put it over the end of the line. You also use electrical tape. That way, when you're shoving through, you're not getting rust, debris, and rocks and things in your brake system. I'm gonna attempt to run this brake line inside the frame for more protection. I'm gonna make it yet. Doesn't look like it. There it is right there. And then the frame gets boxed in right there, so I can't see it anymore. Don't think that inside the frame thing is going to work as well as I think it was going to. Man, look how bad this poor truck is. Thought this thing was in pretty good shape and it's just kind of falling apart. Alright, we're going to pull this back and try a new angle. I guess we'll try above the frame. I normally go above the frame anyway, but I wanted to give this a shot. I lost my vacuum cap, which is very unfortunate, and I can see the dust inside of here now. So before I put brake fluid in this line and put it on, I'm going to have to clean this out. I found a new vacuum cap. My other one got eaten by the frame. So I'm in the same place as before. The ABS module's right here, and I'm just going to run it from the outside here on top of the frame and guide it through this way. There, finally got the line through. Now I'm going to pull a bunch of this through here so I can flare it super easily, and then I'll pull it back and get it installed. So I finished running this back line. I got it attached right here, and it goes on top of the frame on the outside of the gas tank. Up here, kind of hiding, runs all the way along the frame. You can see it peeking out up there. And then it does a hard U-turn. And then hits my ABS actuator right here. I ran them all in such a way to make sure they aren't touching each other or the frame, to make sure they don't rub holes in one another. And ran them all through the factory mountings. Now I'm inside the wheel well, checking out the rest of the lines here. So there's two on the outside. Run to their appropriate lines. That one down there you can see runs through those factory fittings right there to the right front. And then of course this one here with nice gentle bends and no kinks. These two that go to the master cylinder, you need to put little bends in them like this to allow for flexing between the body and the frame so they don't break. And then this one I almost kinked it, but managed to save it. I have the master cylinder here full of brake fluid, and it all drained out when it was sitting empty for the last month, unfortunately. So we have to do bench bleeding. So we're going to kind of mask bench bleed it, where I have a volunteer I found on the street to push my brake pedal for me. So he's going to give me some pressure. Go ahead and do that and hold it down. And then I'm going to crack this loose until I get brake fluid come out of it. Didn't get any that time, so go ahead and let up and hit it again. Here I am, like trying to take a video, thinking that it'll go like quick and easy, and it's just gonna sit here and fight me. Weird. I go ahead and pump it. Let's see if something comes out of this. Something's moving. There we go. There's some fluid. Okay, perfect. Go ahead and hold that down. There's probably a crap ton of air in there now, but at least it did something. I've always bled these with the pressure bleeder, and this is not working. So got the truck back on the road now. Fought trying to bleed the brakes, tried a vacuum bleeder, and good old-fashioned one person running the pedal, the other person running the bleeder screws, and just not having any luck with it. Had the same problems in the past. Just end up having to get a pressure bleeder and having to open up the bleeder screws that way, and then you start with the master cylinder and open up every single line as you go down the system in order to get it to bleed properly. Very annoying, but very effective. I ended up having to do that at work since I didn't want to wait a week to get a pressure bleeder. So now that I'm back on the road, we'll give our brake lines a shot here. I'm gonna try them a couple of times here just to make sure they're working. I'm not gonna stomp on it, but just fairly aggressive. Oh, ABS activated, so that's good. All right, brakes are fixed. Now I can go back to hauling broken cars. So after all that beating on it, then you want to check all of your fittings, because you make sure they're good and dry, clean them off. Make sure you check the master cylinder as well. That one's dry. Here's the master cylinder fittings, both dry as could be. Reservoir's still full, I can see the fluid floating around in there. All dry as could be. Perfect. We have our fitting feeding the rear brakes. Our 2 brake lines here. And that went all the way over there. I'm gonna zoom in because I'm tired of crawling in grass. So once you have all your brake lines checked and they're not leaking after you beat on it, then you can be sure that your car is now safe to drive on the road.